And John, like we talked about this before, like you're not a big. I don't know. Have you ever even watched Dragon Ball?
I have not. You know, I've seen
Oh,
clips here and there, but I've never.
well,
It's one of those. It's one of those things that feels very daunting to try and get into at this point. Like there is
yeah,
so much Dragon Ball out there. I don't even know where to start, and like it feels very overwhelming to even try.
yeah. The only thing I would say is that kind of like you were saying before with like sitcoms being like 22-minute episodes.
Yep.
Same is true for this. This was a 20-minute anime, so you can plow through a 3 episodes in an hour, but depending on where you started, yeah, there's a lot to go through. I just had the benefit of growing up with it, so I've seen every single episode, I've rewatched it multiple times. Not hard for me, so I've loved Dragon Ball my whole life, and with this movie, the one thing I would say that you could do, and probably as someone who's never seen anything, if you watch the last, like, 3 movies, then, like, the last was it 3 or 4? The newest theatrical released movies, you'd be able to watch those as a first-time viewer and get what's going on in that movie. You wouldn't know it's kinda like jumping into a Marvel movie, like, you wouldn't know all the nuances between the characters, but you would understand the direct dynamics between the characters in these situations. And
Mhm.
especially with the movie before this one, it had some of the absolute best 2D animation of anything ever put, especially in the Dragon Ball world. Like Dragon Ball Super Broly was peak Dragon Ball as far as animation itself was concerned. It shit was incredible. The interesting thing with this one is that it was the first time they went full 3D models for the characters. And that was my biggest concern with this, and I guess I'm happy to report that it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, and it actually like, it worked a lot better than I ever thought it would have worked, in all honesty. Like, it's in nowhere near as good as the, like, Broly animation was, but that was, like I said, that was, like, 2D classic anime animation. But I think they did good enough on this for someone like me who is, like, I've seen every episode of Dragon Ball. I've seen every movie. I've seen all the non-canon movies. I even like Dragon Ball GT. I just like Dragon Ball. And you don't know what that means, but as to Dragon Ball GT is a non-canon story that came out on Toonami after Dragon Ball Z ended, and they wanted to continue the story, but Akira Toriyama wasn't a part of it. But nevertheless, I even like that shit. I play all the games. It's just good stuff. Like you said, I have more Dragon Ball statues than I have anything else. And
Mhm.
no, those are my most expensive ones too. But the fun thing about this one, I would say, if anything, they had a lot of meta humor in it that like made fun of themselves. And like for anyone who actually like watches Dragon Ball, you would know for like the last, I mean, ever since the Cell Saga, Gohan has been benched, and Gohan is that guy right there. But he was a kid back in the Cell Saga days, and essentially, for everyone who knows Dragon Ball, you know. But for John, he was essentially Goku's kid, who's the main character, and he eventually is trains, and he's able to take out the big bad guy as like a little teenager. He's like has the most potential to be like the most powerful dude ever, but he's also like a nerd. So like, and his mom doesn't want him doing the fighting stuff. So like after he does that, they just bench him after that, and he's just becomes a teacher and does all this other stuff. So they like, but they poke a lot of fun at that stuff in this movie, and this movie really focuses on getting Gohan off the bench and making him be, without spoilers, but like he reaches a potential of sorts in this movie, and it's really fucking cool. Like, and it has nods to, if anybody out there saw, I don't really want to spoil it, but if anybody saw like the old Super Saiyan 5 like picture of Goku where he had like super long white hair, he looked like Super Saiyan 3, and it was called like Dragon Ball AF, and there was always this picture of this Goku out there, and it was always, everyone said it's Goku, it's Super Saiyan 5, and this was never a thing for you, John. That never happened. Anybody out there knows it, but like that's the vibes I got with what they did with Gohan towards the end. It's very reminiscent of that. There's also a really great post credit scene that has some great payoff for everybody who's a Vegeta fan, which I am. So definitely stay for the post credit scene. But I don't, and I would talk about the main big bad here, but like John, you obviously have no idea what the hell I'm talking about right now. But I had no idea that the main big bad guy, and by big I mean like the literal actual big bad guy at the end. I had no idea he was in the film. Like, I only saw one trailer of this, and I don't remember them mentioning that this was in the trailer or that he was in the movie in any way, shape, or form. And this character in I don't wanna say his name because I don't wanna spoil it in case they really didn't say it in the trailer and it was just something that I just missed. But that dude, the, like, OG version of that dude is, like, probably literally my favorite character outside of, like, Vegeta and what Gohan used to be. So I was very torn on how that character was used. I don't want to say too much, but all I can say is that like I can see maybe why they did what they did, as opposed to really bringing that person back into it, just because they didn't want to like kind of rehash what they already did with Frieza. Like they kind of brought him back. Kind of maybe that's the only thing I can think of as to why they went this route with this character. Because they did the same with Broly. Like Broly was already a thing, even though it was a non-canon thing. But then they brought him into it, and they kind of rehashed a character already. They brought Frieza back in the other movie, so they kind of rehashed him. So that's the only thing I can think of as to why they did what they did with this character. So I didn't really like that, but I didn't hate it. And the two like superhero dudes in it, Gamma 1 and Gamma 2, were a lot more likable than I ever thought they were gonna be. Like I honestly wouldn't even mind if they were, again, without saying too much, but if they could be mainstays later on, that would be fine to some capacity anyway. And even the little scientist guy who makes them, ended up being fine. Red Ribbon Army is still a Red Ribbon Army. Um, but yeah, it was good.
So,
John, I would say you
so
could
that's
maybe watch it, but I don't know. You wouldn't know what the hell was going on for sure.
Well, that's fascinating to me though that they were able to keep the big bad under wraps and like that you didn't know who it was going into it, because that just doesn't seem. I mean, in a day and age where trailers seem to give away entire stories, not just who's in the, and then you have casting notices out there, and just there's so much information out there. It's hard for secrets to be kept, and I know Marvel does a fairly decent job at keeping, their twists and turns, but keeping an entire villain of a piece secret seems like, so to me, like I hear that, I'm intrigued. I'm like, that must have been really cool to go into a movie and not know that until you get to it. But it sounds like that coolness was kind of offset by what the character actually was and how they were
Yes.
portrayed.
Yes.
So
Yes. It's
so
like
yeah.
imagine it for me though too, it's like imagine for like a Star Wars reference, I guess. Imagine like, if Darth Maul was your favorite character, right? And then you find out they're bringing him back in Clone Wars, right? But then imagine it like it wasn't really him.
Yeah.
You know what I
Okay.
mean? So
Yep. Yep.
it's like yeah, it's
Like,
Darth.
awesome, he's
He's
back, but it's
back,
not
but it's
really
not
him.
him. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not
Yep.
really him. It was a
I could
something that was kind of like that.
I can understand that. Yeah,
So it was like,
definitely.
because and mainly just because like this character is literally like my favorite. I don't want to say what he was because I don't was he was my favorite villain. Just put it that way. He's my favorite villain in all of Dragon Ball. He's the absolute best. And they found a way to bring him back. And but it really wasn't him. So it was kind of like, but I get why
Yeah.
they didn't. If I'm right as to why, then it totally makes sense. But then for anybody out there who is actually a Dragon Ball purist, the fun like one of the funniest things I mentioned, this film actually has a lot of humor in it, but a lot of it wasn't like they had the slapsticky, goofy kind of humor that Dragon Ball has always had, but a lot of it, I was just surprised to see, like, how much of it was actually more smart and kinda meta and how it made fun of themselves more so than anything. Like, there is I don't wanna say too much of it, but nevertheless, I can say this is a spoiler section, but anyway, but there's a scene in the I won't say who and what happened, but there's a scene where someone's fighting somebody, and he gets hit, and you know how in comic books you see, like, the comic book, "blah," like, the sound effects. During the fight, you're seeing him land a few hits on this person, and you see the sound effects happen, and as a dude gets hit, he's like, "Oh, why am I seeing his sound effects?" So, like, he was literally seeing them himself, and it was,
Yeah.
like, funny when it happened. But then
Yeah.
with there was, the funniest thing to me, because I remembered this scene instantly. Back in Dragon Ball Z in the Cell Saga, there's an episode, it was like a throwaway side episode where Goku and Piccolo go try to get their driver's license, and there's a scene where Piccolo needs to drive something, and he obviously isn't driving it very well, and he's just like he just says, like, "I never got my driver's license," and it was just a complete callback to this one throwaway episode that I vividly remember and immediately started geeking out because obviously Goku and Piccolo didn't get their driver's license in that episode. So, like, for me, it was hilarious. I don't know if anybody else caught it, but I
Awesome.
thought that was great. But there was just good stuff in there, and obviously everyone loved, like, you don't really know what this means too much, but Gohan and that Namekian armor there, everyone thought that was, like, the coolest shit ever because that's, like, Piccolo's armor, and he, like, trained Gohan, so he gave him a version of it, and, like, he was super fucking cool looking when he wore that armor there, and so he gave it back to him, and this it was just there was a lot of payoff for Gohan and Piccolo fans. This movie was really just all about making Gohan and Piccolo not be bench warmers anymore. There was some great stuff that happened with Piccolo too, like towards the end. There's literally what I refer to as Chad Piccolo in this movie, and it was amazing. Like, it was really good. It wasn't amazing, but it was really funny. As soon as this happened to Piccolo, I literally looked over at Ada, and, like, we were both laughing just about how it looked visually in general. Like, it was cool, but it was just funny, and I immediately said, like, "That's Chad Piccolo," and, like, it's just true because it was just, like, it's a Chad, and it was funny. If you see the movie, you know what I mean, but nevertheless, I know you have no idea about anything I just said, John, but that
No.
was my review. It was good. The 3D animation worked more than I thought it would, but I didn't like the 3D animation more than the 2D animation that happened in Broly. But the humor worked. I didn't really like what they ended up doing with the big bad, but I understand why they did it. But most importantly, they got Gohan off the bench and it was fucking cool, and that's all that matters. Like, it's I just hope they carry that stuff forward if they continue doing movies every few years or if they have another series come out. And they did have one tease, because I don't really follow the manga, I just watch the anime. But they did have a tease of what could potentially lead to another series if it's not already being played out in the manga, because Goku and Vegeta mentioned something about, like, all the other gods of destruction are still out there, and it throws up the pictures of all the gods of destruction. So they still have that thread there, and like the Broly thread is still there too. So there's a lot of stuff they could do with it. So in the end, I liked it, but if it's Dragon Ball, you'd have to do a lot for me not to like it. In all honesty,
Mhm.
but yeah, John, I would recommend watching like Dragon Ball Super Battle of Gods, and then Resurrection F, and then Broly, and then this, and you'd probably have a good feel of what at least this current run of Dragon Ball Super is. But there is a lot of Dragon Ball you'd have to get into, and if you're not into it, like, there's a lot of people that just, like, don't get into this kinda anime. I just happen to grow up with it, so that's why I'm into it.